Hey Val Coleman, my name is Lyle, and in this video I'm going to give you an introduction to Viedoc as a monitor type user. Although I never worked as a monitor, I was a study coordinator in the past, so I understand what's going on from the investigator's perspective, and I have a pretty good idea of what a monitor would like to see in an ECRF as well. As I've said in the training video for the site staff, if you're bemoaning having to learn a new ECRF system, don't panic. You'll find that Viedoc has the same superstructure as what you're used to, but it's more user-friendly and intuitive, and it also looks pretty as well. The first thing you do in Viedoc is make a password for your account and then log in to the main page. You'll see a page that looks like this. We call it the landing page. You have some stats and internal messages at the top, and then the studies which you are invited to on the bottom on this virtual shelf. If you click on a study, the screen will auto-scroll to the bottom, and then depending on what permissions you have, there will be some informational tabs about the study. I will go through all of these, but depending on which permissions the study designer gave you, you may not see everything here. For this first tab, which we're already viewing, you'll see some percentages below, which give you an idea of your workload, such as closed and open queries, the forms with issues, such as fields which have been initialized but have missing data. Below that, you have percent of entered data, which has been reviewed by the monitor, the data manager, and source verified. And below that, you have the percent of entered data, which has been signed by the investigator. Right now, we're viewing the stats for all the sites that we have access to, but you can limit this to just one country or just one site within this country. You'll see in the middle here the number of participants in the study and the first and last participants in, as well as messages over here to the right. These messages are built in by the designer of the study, and they're typically things like new participants screened or completed, or a serious adverse event, but they could be set up as an alert for any data field within the study. If you're thinking, I need more information than this, just wait a minute because these are only the basics. You have a lot more options for viewing the data. This is the Data Export tab where you can select the data that you want and then export it to several different formats. You can parse the data by country and site like before, but also down to the level of a single participant if you wanted to. We'll use all the Swedish participants for this example. You can also select all events or a specific one. We use the word event in Viedoc because a visit is a specific time point, but event can be an abstraction of all kinds of different things that could happen in a study. Like you see in this drop-down list here, events are not just visits, they're also adverse events, concomitant medications, adding a participant into the system, etc. So that's what we mean when we say event, anything like that. Another option for grouping data is time periods, like if you wanted to view all the data edited since the last monitoring visit. This demo study gets toyed with pretty frequently, so let's look at all the edited data from the beginning of this year. Next, we pick the exact forms or ECRF pages we want to view. If there are specific items in the specific forms that we're interested in, you can parse the data and give exactly what you want. So here I want everything from the EKG form, but I only want the blood pressure and heart rate fields from the vital signs form. The EKG is green because everything is selected, and the vital signs are orange because I'm leaving some stuff out. Everything else remains gray because we're not using it. Next, we select which type of data we want to see. In other words, data that has or has not been signed and source verified. For this example, let's look at unsigned data, which is pending source data verification. So that would be newly entered data. There's also some options here to include for other things, such as the queries. If you click on those, even more options show up. I clicked on queries and you see that query history showed up. So yeah, why not? Let's click on that too. The last thing we do is pick the format we would like to export it to. You have several options. But I imagine most of you will choose direct exports to Excel or comma-separated files, which open easily in Excel and have the option of coming with a SAS script. If you click export here, it'll start working over to the right. It will flash when it is finished, and then the export will remain here until you delete it, so you have a lock. When it's all done compiling, you download it right here, and let's open it and see how it looks. The first tab is a README, and the other tabs are going to be forms because I set that to be grouped this way, but you can also output it to one big sortable list if you want to. And here are our queries in this final tab. All right, that was exporting data. So if you have your own system for previewing data using Excel or some other secondary software, we've made it easy for you to keep that system. But we also have a pre-built option for making some simple graphs via this Preview Data button over here to the left, next to the Export Data button. Here I've preset everything as if I want to track every participant's diastolic blood pressure over the course of the study. So the first thing I see is a list of all the data that we asked for. In these tabs in the top left, we can pick an appropriate graph for viewing this data. Let's make a line graph, and we'll put visit on the x-axis and blood pressure on the y-axis. And I want to see all the participants on the same plot, so we'll pick subject ID as the series/category for delineating groups. Then we click draw, and the graph will be produced. If you hover over some of these outliers, it will tell you the exact value as well as which participant it is for, so we can check them up later if we want to. And if you want to share this graph, you can save it or you can email it directly by using these buttons down here. For a more practical overview of the study's performance, you have the Metrics tab, which gives you details about the queries and how well the data is being handled. These initial stats here give you an idea of what's happened in the last few weeks. The yellow bar is for the last 7 days, and the gray ones to the left are for the weeks before that. For a closer look, we click on the fine print in blue here, and then we get a breakdown of all the queries, the total amount, how many are built-in system queries, and how many are manual monitor-made queries. You also see a pie chart to the right showing the status of all these queries, and bar plots below showing which visits, forms, and items are the biggest query makers. And further below, there are Venn diagrams showing the data fields and participants with the most queries. Scrolling back to the top, you'll see that you have the same options for parsing data as before. So if we click on Sweden and then Uppsala University, and then we redraw all the graphs, we'll have the numbers specifically for that site. Now over to performance. Here you can compare the performance of one site to the entire study or to each other, and you can evaluate who's doing well versus who needs help. Right now it's comparing our previous selection of Uppsala University to the entire study. You see percentages for the participants screened, enrolled, completed, and withdrawn, and comparisons between the two based on preset expectations. Uppsala is shown in orange compared to the entire study, which is shown in dark gray. Below, you see how much Uppsala is contributing to the total number of queries and missing data. And below that, you have parameters for how long it takes sites to enter data, resolve queries, and how often they're deleting forms. Note, the way we calculate the time it takes to enter data starts when the visit is first initialized to when the last data point is entered for that visit. Scrolling back up to the top here, for the last tab, we have missing data, which lists the top 5 events, forms, and items which have missing values. Note that this is data which the site has either confirmed as missing or has left blank after initializing a visit. This helps you examine which forms might be problematic for sites. With all of these metrics, if you scroll to the bottom, you are able to save them to a PDF or you can send them by email. After metrics, you have the roles tab, which lists your role, as well as the roles you manage. If we scroll down, we'll see these other roles with numbers to the left showing how many there are. These are all the roles that exist for the sites that you manage. There's a log to the right where you can see who the users are, what site they work for, when they were added and by whom, and when they stopped, and also the number of data edits and sessions they have made. This is a good place to work as the research police to make sure people aren't sharing usernames or to look for suspicious activity or suspicious non-activity. If you scroll all the way to the bottom, you see that you can also print out these logs just like you can for the metrics. All right, so that's pretty much all the top level stuff you can do. So let's actually start working on some participant data. If you click on the green launch button here, you'll be taken into the selection page for a study. And here, every participant which has been entered for the sites that you manage will show up as a card displaying some basic identifiers like their initials, sex, age, and screening or randomization number. From this page, you can search for a specific participant, you can organize them in rows, you can see all the participants for a specific site, or you can sort them by the last day their data was entered, or by importance, which is the number of issues for that participant's data. I want to mention that the search engine is pretty good, so if you can't remember the participant's basic info, you can search for that one unique thing about them that you do remember. If the site staff has addressed everything from their end, in other words, they've entered all the form data and addressed all the queries, then a green checkmark icon will show up in the top right here. But even if there's a green checkmark, you as the monitor or the data manager will see tasks for a participant's ECRF. These show up as yellow icons with numbers, and these require your attention, such as clinical review or source data verification. If there are queries for a participant, then a red eye icon will show up. And let's click on this participant's data, which has some issues. So I just opened the details page for a specific participant, and here is where our screens will stop looking the same, but nonetheless, I tried to make a familiar example. You'll see the same icons you did on the page before, and they are here to direct you to the forms with the issues. But before we get to work on all these issues and queries, let's orient ourselves. The participant's card will show up on the left here, so you can double check whose data you're working on. The initial participant form, which is the first form that the site will use to enter a new participant, is here on the left. So if you want to review that, you click here. All the scheduled visits will show up in a row here. You will only see the ones that have been initialized. Over here you have the unscheduled visits, adverse events, medical history, and concomitant medications. Clicking on any of those will open a window for you to navigate the forms more specifically, like so. And as an example of how to do review and add queries, let's start with one of the scheduled visits. So if you're just getting started for the first time with this participant and all the data has been entered and everything went perfectly according to plan, then it will look like this. The visit date, as well as all the forms below it, will have green check marks, as well as a number of tasks and a yellow icon. There are 3 grayed out checks, 1 for data management review and 2 which concern the monitors, the clinical review and the source data verification. If you click on one of these forms, it will open up and you can see the data entered by the site. From here, you can also look at the audit trail by flipping the switch in the top right here, and it will appear below. You'll see the initial entry, any changes, as well as the users associated with those changes. Also from within this window, you can mark the data as reviewed, source verified, and if everything is acceptable and squared away, you can lock the form so that the site can't make any more changes. Note that the site can still sign locked forms and the data manager can still review them. You don't have to click into every single form to review them. You can do it in batches by clicking on this clipboard icon on the top right. You'll see a list of all the forms which are available for you to review for this participant. There's all the same icons as before, as well as an eye icon which indicates whether or not you viewed that form before. If you want to look at it now, you can do that by clicking on it. And then to make the review checks, you can click them like so, or click these boxes in the top right to make mass selections. Let's mark everything for this visit as reviewed and source verified, and when I'm finished, I click Ready at the top. You'll see now that all the task icons are gone, and we are all finished with this visit. But again, you don't have to do this one visit at a time. If you click on this clipboard again, you'll see that you can mark all the forms as reviewed or source verified, as well as lock all the forms for a participant. Okay, so that was Fantasyland, where there are no queries, but now let's talk about the real world and how queries work in Viedoc. There are built-in system queries or edit checks, like this one here, as well as make your own queries, like this one here. They look the same. But if you want to know where each one came from, you can click on the audit trail and check. To make a new query for the site to answer, you open the form, You click on the top right box, and then you pick a specific field which you would like to query. You then type in a message for the site to see. And when you're happy with that, you click Ready. And you'll see that the query was added and it says awaits answer in yellow right below the field. When we close this window, we will see the red eye icon now appears for that form. This same icon appears for system queries, and the site will see these same icons in the same places as you until they address the query. Once queries have been addressed, they will change to tasks for the monitor to review and judge whether or not the response to that query was acceptable. The same approval process goes for fields which the site has confirmed as missing. The monitor must approve those as well. So these previous examples show the basic mechanics for working with queries, but when it comes to real-world applications, we imagine most of you will utilize this issue list, which I passed over earlier, but I think you'll appreciate it more now. If you click on this number of issues here, then the selection page will show a list of all the queries which require specifically your attention. You'll see that the pull-down menu over here has changed to My Queries. These are queries that you have left to the site or responses from them that are awaiting your approval. You have many options for viewing issues besides the My Queries option, but we imagine this will be the one you spend the most time with. If we click one of these queries in the list here, it takes us directly to the form which has the query. There we can evaluate the response like we showed earlier. And when we're done, we close the window and it takes us back to the list and the answered response is removed. Thus, the monitor can easily work their way through all the queries without playing hide and seek going through all the forms. Now we're going to talk about how the system handles queries that span across multiple forms. In other words, cross-form edit checks. I'll explain what that means with an example, and I'm going to show this example from the investigator's perspective. I have multiple accounts for this study for testing purposes, and now I'm logged in as an investigator. So you're going to see me enter data just like the site will. And here we go. All right, cross-form edit checks. Let's say you have a system query that is dependent on two data fields, but one of those data fields is found on an earlier visit or a different form. In the example here, we have two forms, one with an edit check and one with data for which that edit check is dependent on. If you're confused, just watch this example and it will make sense at the end. So here I am as the investigator entering data for the first data field. I save it and everything is fine. I get a green check mark. Then I go to the later data field. I enter the wrong data and the system edit check appears to tell me that. So I'll change my answer and then save it with the correct data. Again, I get a green check mark and everything is fine. But now let's say I go back and change that earlier data field without the edit check. In some systems, the monitor might have to worry if the queries are going to fire like they're supposed to. But in our system, if I enter the data for this field that conflicts with the later one, then the query will fire like we would expect it to on the later data field. This is a great feature because monitors and data managers can rely on the system more and don't have to spend time cross-examining critical data points. One last thing about queries is the pre-query. This is something you may not use. In fact, most studies do not use them, but we'd like you to be aware of it because some of you might find it useful. A pre-query is raised by someone delegated as support staff, perhaps a quality control specialist or maybe even the data manager. And while you trust this person to review the numbers, you might not trust them enough to send full-fledged queries for the site staff to answer. So instead of going to the site staff, the queries go to the monitor for approval. And if approved, they become the usual queries for the site staff to answer. Again, most of our clients do not use these, but I'm not sure everyone is aware of them either. So they exist, they're out there if you would like to use them. The last thing I'd like to show you in this video is for when you need to train sites, and for that we'll start back at the main page. Right below the launch button, you have the e-learning button, which takes you to our instructional material. You can read each one of these modules individually if there's something specific you're looking for, or you can print out everything as a PDF. And you also have instructional videos like this one for site staff or other operations. But in addition to that, back on the launch screen, you'll see this switch in the middle where you can go between production mode, which is where you handle real study data, and demo mode, where you or the site can practice on entering or handling dummy data for training purposes. Demo mode works the exact same as production, and everything you enter here will get saved in a separate audit trail. But the keyword is separate, so make sure that the site doesn't accidentally enter real study data because you won't be able to transfer it into the production study. And you'll see this warning in red telling you that. Okay, that is it for monitor training. Before you go, you should log out. If you don't, it's no big deal, but the participant you were working on last will be locked for 5 minutes if you immediately log back in again. Safety first. So, good luck with the research, and we hope you enjoy using Viedoc.